Shouldn't skipping to payday be as easy as skipping to the next song? Introducing MyPay from Chime. Get up to $500 of your pay before payday. Get paid when you save with MyPay. Start at Chime.com. Eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. Provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. and Stride Bank N.A.
Your teen requested a ride, but this time not from you. It's through their Uber teen account. You drive your teenager around, a lot, to their friend Jacob's house, their other friend Jake's house, to James's, to Jaden's, to Jalen's, to...
Mom, this is Jake's house, not Jacob's.
Now with an Uber teen account, your teen can request a ride under your supervision. They'll ride with a highly rated driver, and with live trip tracking, you'll follow along the whole ride to their friends' houses that all sound the same. Add your teen to your Uber account today. See app for details.
Bye, Mom.
Hi friends, and welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we have a really special guest. Tony Arterburn is a former U.S. Army paratrooper and world champion powerlifter who infuses his passion for history and his personal life experience into captivating narratives. As the founder and CEO of Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Exchange, along with the innovative monthly precious metals membership program, Tony is dedicated to empowering individuals with financial knowledge and opportunities. Splitting his time between Texas and Missouri, Tony, accompanied by his loyal companion Beans, continues to inspire and educate audiences on the timeless value of precious metals. And guys, I had the pleasure of having Tony on my podcast. We had a great time talking, and hopefully I can have him back soon. But I learned so much from this interview. I know that you guys will learn so much from this interview. Of course, you can find everything associated with Tony and all of his business and everything in the show notes. So his Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Exchange, everything, his podcast, everything that he mentions in this interview, I have linked it in the show notes. So I hope that you all enjoy. Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for coming on The Rabbit Hole.
Well, I'm just so glad that I get a chance to finally sit down with you and we get to do it in person.
This is really cool. So this is my very first in-person interview. Most of the time, I mean, you don't get a chance to make the schedules work like this. It actually almost didn't work out.
You should be digital right now. Like
on
you should
Zoom.
be on StreamYard or Zoom. And so it is kind of weird. Yeah, I haven't done it. I don't think I've done it in studio since I went and did Tinfoil Hat.
You did that one in person?
I was in their studio in Hollywood. That's the first time I've done it in studio in a while.
I've never done it. Well, most of the time, almost nobody's in Denver, right? I can't. I know of only like one other big podcast in Denver, and then I don't travel that frequently, just because I'm boring. So, but it worked out, yeah, because we made a last minute trip out here. And you're out here half the time, so we're in Branson, Missouri.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're able to make it work.
So, yeah. Thanks for meeting me.
Absolutely, and thanks for letting me have Beans. It's for the folks who, I mean, it's audio only, so you don't see my Chihuahua mix that's on my lap.
Super cute.
And Beans the Brave, she goes everywhere with me. So she's happy. She knows all my secrets.
I believe that.
Yeah.
You think she'll tell me some of
them? If you have the password.
She seems like a talker.
She is a talker. Especially if you're another dog, which she's very much opposed to other dogs. So you would know it. That there's no other dogs here, so she's very calm.
Yeah, she seems good. So, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the money system, because like what is going on? First of all, we're all seeing inflation, and it's hitting us hard.
Right. Like
really hard now. So I think that it's on everybody's minds just because we can't afford to buy groceries.
Where does it come from?
Where does it come from?
Where does inflation come from?
Well, and where does money even come from? Why do we even use it, right? Like, didn't we start with like a barter system? Like, I've got a cow, you got some vegetables, I'll give you...
We have the history of money, like having a stable store of value. Money makes civilization possible. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight. There's a huge difference between currency and money.
Okay.
They can be the same thing, But in the modern world, they're not. Currency is like, it's fiat currency. Fiat means by decree, means they say so. And currency is a lot like an electric current. If it stops, it dies. What you're watching right now, we're actually inside of an experiment.
Oh, great.
Okay,
Love that
this is a real live experiment that we are in. It's the modern monetary theory, MMT. How's it working out for you? Because the average person says, "Oh, it's inflation. Inflation's getting us," but no one ever asks where it comes from. What's it a byproduct of?
Yeah.
Well, when the government needs to pay for all of its corruption, its welfare, warfare state, the fact that it doesn't have a budget, it just inflates the money supply. It took us 200 years plus of our history to hit $1 trillion in debt. We hit $1 trillion in debt right after I was born. I was born the day the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, December 26, 1979.
Great. So
right after that, we hit about $1 trillion in debt. Okay? Now we go $1 trillion in debt every 90 days.
how is that even so?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything's accelerated because now you're inside of an experiment. And the experiment started August 15th, 1971, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. He interrupted, on a Sunday night, a showing of Bonanza, the broadcast of remember the Western show Bonanza? Which ironically is about people going out west to find gold and silver, but I don't think anybody caught on to that till later. Well, he said he's going to close the gold window. The reason he did that is because the rest of the world started to take notice that we'd taken the silver out of our coinage starting in 1965. One of the things that the deep state made sure to put Kennedy on the last thing that was silver because he wanted to keep the silver in the coinage. That's probably, maybe we can get into that part of his executive order. And one of the entities that he pissed off was the Fed.
Oh,
aside from everybody else, but he made,
I just did a Kennedy update episode, and he pissed everybody off,
everybody.
And then they killed him.
The Israelis, the CIA, and everybody. I mean,
they're like, we can't deal with this dude anymore. Let's just get him out of here.
He's too tethered to reality and doesn't want everybody, doesn't want to stand on a pile of bodies. So we got to get rid of this guy. Well, you're inside this experiment because in August 15th, 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. Gold was $35 an ounce. At the end of the 1970s, gold was $800 an ounce. What a lot of people don't understand is that gold didn't go up. Gold didn't go up in value. The dollar lost purchasing power. And that's why you had massive inflation in the 70s. It's actually called stagflation, where you have high unemployment, low economic output, and high inflation. And they stepped in at the end of the 1970s with the head of the Federal Reserve. His name was Paul Volcker, and they raised interest rates to the teens. So if you're going to get a mortgage, it's 13, 14%. So right now we're complaining about, 3, 4, 5%, whatever.
Right.
It was 14, 15%, crazy numbers, And my dad, he was building houses at the time in Dallas, Texas, and as a home builder. So I know all about these stories, about what interest rates were. The reason that they raised interest rates was because they wanted to curtail the money supply. And it was starting to show up in the price of metals. A little side story kind of with silver was the Hunt family in Dallas. They were from North Texas. They were, billionaires. They owned the Libyan oil supply before Gaddafi took it, back in the 60s. They were just very rich. Well, they cornered the silver market. And if you really look at their history, they drove silver up to $52.50 an ounce in 1980. Now, $52.50 and $80 in 1980 is like $300 and something today, maybe more. And they got taken out, basically. All of their banking and their contracts. There was a call made, stop these guys, because what they were exposing was there's something wrong with the dollar.
Yeah.
Through the 80s, gold went down and it stayed flat through the 90s. It's one of they really made a point to put people in the stock market, put people in the casino, and that's the way that they wouldn't notice the inflation. 1974 is when we get the 401k, so you get the IRA. Most people before that, to buy a house, put some money in savings, you still had $1 in 1930 would be the same dollar in 1945.
Right, and eventually you can retire.
And you could, right.
But you're also buying a house for like $15,000-$20,000.
Correct.
And you have like the wife stays home with the kids, husband goes to work, like it all makes sense.
That's another part of this story.
Okay.
Well, I'll give you an example. And I use this all the time, so if my audience is listening to this, they're going to get so bored. But if you went to see George Washington's inaugural at the end of the 1700s, 1790s, and you bought a pair of shoes, those shoes would cost the same in 1900 because there was no inflation. So inflation's not part of our history. It's not something you should just accept. We had a bimetallic system. It was set up by the founding fathers. It's in the Constitution that only Congress can coin money, and it has to be gold and silver. And there's a reason for that. It didn't say that print, and it doesn't talk about, central bank. There's no central bank in the Constitution. It doesn't talk about fractional reserve. It doesn't talk about...
We can get all into the Federal Reserve.
Correct.
And all that.
Well, there's a whole, yes. And
yeah,
there's
that's
a reason.
A whole animal.
It is a beast. And it's funny because I've always been interested in history. When I was in the military, especially my last tour in Iraq, 03, 04, I read like 200 books. I mean, I was just, wow. I was first Army company on the ground in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So I was part of the first waves of those, post 9/11 wars. And there's nothing to do. I mean, you better read. So I would read, and that would be my goal was like, don't get blown up, don't get shot, come back, read a book, see if you can, score some whiskey or something from the Kurdish people will help you out and find a liquor store or something. But, I started to dig into history, and every time I'd put down like a court historian or something, like an approved history, I go, what's missing here? It just seemed like the story's incomplete. And when I really dug deeper, that's when I found that all this is, people say, follow the money, follow the money. Sort of. You follow the origins of those who control the money supply, right? Not just the money itself. It's the origin story of the money supply, like who controls it. Like you go back to the 19th century, like we didn't have inflation here. Well, they were fighting. The international banking cartels wanted so badly to have a central bank here. And matter of fact, they had two. The first one failed. It just did not fit. It was like parasitic. It did not fit with the American character. They tried it again after the War of 1812, which had roots in the War of 1812. They got it. And then Andrew Jackson came along, and he called him a den of vipers and thieves. He said, I'm going to rout you out. It's the last thing I do. And he wanted I killed the bank on his tombstone. So in 1836, he killed the second bank in the United States. He literally would not extend the charter. And so that stayed that way. Interesting side note, J.P. Morgan, the House of Morgan, he was born in 1837. He died in 1913. So his lifespan was the entire time his life was between the second bank of the United States and the Federal Reserve. Weird, huh? Like his whole life, like that, just right in a fit, like Tetris, you know. But the reason that it was so important for them to hijack the money supply is you go back to something that Mayor Amschel Rothschild said. He said, "I care not who sits on the British throne. The person who controls the British Empire is the person who controls the British money supply, and I control the British money supply."
I haven't covered the Rothschilds yet, but I have covered the Rockefellers. And the Rothschilds
they go together.
They've been highly requested, so we will be covering them soon.
Good.
But yeah, we haven't hit on them yet.
Well, that's, that kind of Babylonian money magic.
Mm-hmm.
The Rothschilds believed that they stem from the line of Nimrod, the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
You can actually, this stuff is real. Like you can look, their history is fascinating. And their legacy money. Like who's the world's richest man? And then you say, it's Elon Musk. And I just start laughing. I'm like, it's not, the world's richest people aren't in the magazines. They're not on the charts. They have legacy money. They have generational wealth.
Old money.
It's very old, and it flows back to, again, finance, banking consortiums and combines and like multinational holding companies. And this is where that stuff flows down from. So it's very important for them to take the United States and its industry and its potential and its energy and convert that. And this is, the Federal Reserve is from 1913, but the meeting on Jekyll Island was actually November 22nd, 1910, so 53 years before the deep state takes out Kennedy. And they have this meeting on Jekyll Island where that's where you get the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin. And it takes a while, they get their tentacles in, and it takes a minute. It's not like they hijack the money supply, all of a sudden it's fake fiat currency.
Right.
You have to initiate a crisis. And the first crisis after 1913 really is the Great Depression. It's funny because Ben Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve, years later, like after the Great Recession in 2009, he came out and he said, well, it's true, the Fed did cause the Great Depression and we're sorry. You can go look at this. It's funny. He's like, but we won't do it again.
We promise.
We promise.
Oh, shut
and because what they were doing, they were expanding the money supply, they were lending out things, and people were borrowing against stocks, right? So then the margin call happens and you can't cover everything and there's a collapse. They know this, right? And it took some years to engineer. They finally got the leverage they wanted. And really, if you look at it through that lens, what did they want? Well, Franklin Roosevelt becomes president, and he says, well, you can turn in your gold. So in April of 1933, he says, it's now illegal for Americans to own gold. Okay?
Illegal.
Illegal. He just signs an executive order and says, turn in your gold. So you can't hold gold. It's anti-hoarding, is what he said. He's like, you can't hold gold as an American citizen. The dollar is still, quote unquote, backed by gold, but you have to turn in your gold bullion. A lot of people didn't. You know how I know? Because I buy it all the time.
Right.
It's called pre-33 American gold, and there's tons of it. And a lot of people didn't turn it in. Good. They just said, what? But here's what happened if you did turn it in. From the founding of our country until 1933, gold was $20 an ounce. Okay? Franklin Roosevelt said, turn it all in, and when he did, he raised it to $35 an ounce. But once they had it, and that gold, by the way, went to the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. That's where it went.
So it's not even staying here.
No. That's right. They wanted this. The whole thing was a heist, like to get the gold, and they needed to expand the money supply. They needed to inflate their way out of the problems. They didn't cover their house fiscally responsibly.
They're dumb. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't know about that they're building and constructing and paying people. There has to be oversight. So what do? You inflate your way out of it. So that's what the Great Depression, that they inflated their way out, but gold stayed $35 an ounce. Even in 1944, you had the Bretton Woods Conference, and that's where you had the new economic world order that was in New Hampshire, where they set up the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank.
Okay.
So it was decided there that the new reserve currency of the world, it's not going to be the pound sterling, it's going to be the dollar. So all these countries around the world start stocking their central banks with dollars, and they know that if they need to convert their dollars, it's $35 an ounce for gold, so they just convert it back into gold. So countries could use the gold window, but you couldn't, right? An American citizen couldn't get the gold from the window, but the other foreign nations could. Matter of fact, if you go look at a bill from that time, the bill, before the Fed completely hijacked it and took over the money supply, it used to say, and I've read it on my show, this note can be exchanged for lawful money. So the note is not money. Right. This is a representation of what you can exchange for lawful money, and guess what lawful money is?
The
Gold.
Well, so could other citizens from other countries, like
Yes.
if you were like a Mexican citizen,
Sure.
you could go, but not an American
Right.
citizen.
It's illegal for you. It was illegal.
That makes no sense.
It does it well as soon as if you realize that when there's demand for gold, it competes with the dollar, especially on hyperdrive. So so let me give you an example. In 2008 and 9, after the big short and the crash and all the TARP funds, and Hank Paulson's begging Nancy Pelosi to give him the $700 billion and all that stuff. Seems quaint now. Like $700 billion? Oh, sure, we'll give that to Ukraine. That's no big deal.
Give it to anybody but our own citizens.
Right, which is, exactly. At that time, the net buying of gold by central banks, it wasn't zero, but is as close to zero as you can look at on a chart. So like banks around the world were not buying gold. Now, it is breaking records. I mean, a breakneck pace of central banks remonetizing all of their holdings with gold, except for this one.
Why?
Because when we buy gold, the price of gold goes up. The dollar's at war with gold. The dollar's at war, and that's why what you're seeing is nonlinear, fourth dimensional warfare, whatever you want to call it, right? This is language. So what's happening around the world, and this is my opinion, but you have the BRICS nations like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They just added Saudi Arabia. Our government just gave up the petrodollar, literally just didn't do anything. Had a 50-year agreement with the Saudis to only convert oil and sales from dollars. We just said, okay, fine, no, but that's the only thing that keeps the dollar alive. We literally did nothing. So we just let it lapse. So all these countries are de-dollarizing. De-dollarization is happening. And the United States, the powers that be, seem to want this. Like they've weaponized the dollar. So we have 40 different sanctions on 36 different countries. These countries want out of the dollar system.
Right.
That's what keeps our system, like Peter Pan. Like if you don't clap for Tinkerbell, she dies.
Yeah.
Right? It's a dollar. If you don't use it, if you don't clap for Tinkerbell, it dies. So this is very strange to watch. We're literally losing all of what made the thing possible. Like we've been able to be so irresponsible and be so ridiculous and have these wars of choice, like going over and just wasting $8 trillion in the Middle East for what? And you and I could probably figure out for what.
Yeah.
It wasn't what they said it was. But
I've got a theory or two.
You got
on
a hunch
that.
or two?
Yeah.
But so really just getting back to how did this happen? There's always been corruption. Governments are always corrupt. I think what the founding fathers tried to do is, when Congress, is only Congress can coin money and only be gold and silver, it doesn't mean there's not going to be corruption. It just means that if you have to pay the bills, like, if you have to account for something, but now we don't have to account for anything, we just have fake money.
Right.
It's like, why even have taxes? Like Kamala Harris has the new tax plan, just basically like they just, did the Sparks notes for the Communist Manifesto and said, let's just do this. Taxes on unrealized gains and stuff. I mean, just insanity. Well, why even tax? I mean, again,
If it's fake money.
Well, they just make it out of thin air. So you are being taxed. Like even if you just try to save dollars, and that's what the average person doesn't understand, is that the system is designed to make you poor. Those that understand the game, like Henry Ford said it best. He's like, if people understood the banking system, there'd be a revolution in the morning. It's that corrupt. And 80% of all the dollars ever created were created in the last 48, 50 months, okay?
Oh, that's good.
All in history.
Jesus.
So what does that do to the purchasing power of the current? If you're saying, "Oh, I got these dollars and I put them away." I'm listening to the guy on the radio says I should get out of debt and put $1,000 in savings. Well, that only works if the $1,000 has the same purchasing power next year as it did this year. It does not, and the reason is because they make more of them. The dollar supply is unlimited. There's 52 times more currency on Earth today than in 1980.
Which is why you could put $1,000 away in 1930 and you could retire on it in 1940, which you put $1,000 away in 2024, and in 2034, you're in debt.
Even with the damage that Franklin Roosevelt did to, and the real mind-blowing thing about gold and silver, and people are like, "Oh, what's a great investment?" I'm like, I don't know, but don't save dollars. Don't save fiat currency. That's how I can tell you that. I know that much. Like, people are like, what's going to go up? I don't know, but the dollar's going down. If you're watching gold right now, I broke $2,500 an ounce, and I think as of this recording, it's over $2,500 an ounce. When I got into this business, it was $1,100.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
And how long have you been in this business?
I've been in Wise Wolf since 2016.
Okay.
As buying privately, and then I started officially in 2018 with a storefront in San Antonio. So we've been through some times. I got into Bitcoin and Bitcoin ATMs. I was some of the first Bitcoin ATMs in the country back in 2016. And please don't ask me if I saved the Bitcoin, because I did, and it was like $400 a coin. I put them through my machine, so I served my customers, but I would have done a lot better had I just saved the Bitcoin. And we can talk about Bitcoin if you want, but it's part of this story. Mm-hmm. There's just so much to unpack here. Like, do you know the reference to Donald Rumsfeld going before the press conference on September 10th, 2001? Okay, he goes out and says, "We can't track $2.3 trillion."
Yep.
Okay, and the next day, whatever hit the Pentagon hit the accounting office, where he said he was going to go find this $2.3 trillion. So under a system of sanity, if you had to account for that, you couldn't lose $2.3 trillion. All right? They need the money supply to be tethered to nothing in order to do this. And then basically it's a magic trick. So if you kind of get normalcy bias, the country did. It's like, oh, we've been on a gold standard. This is the dollar. This is what it buys. People started to catch on in the 70s. There's that Merle Haggard song, "I Wish a Buck Was Still Silver,"
Yeah.
People started going, what's wrong with the money, And I think that's just trying to ask the question, what is the root of inflation? Well, it's debasement. They just take what could be valuable and they just remove it, and then they leave you with this piece of paper.
Yeah.
And you think, well, this is money because it still buys stuff. And technically, you're right, but it doesn't have any value. The average lifespan of a fiat currency in history is 26 years. All fiat currencies have gone to zero. So we've doubled it. And one of the reasons we're able to double it is because we're the world's reserve currency.
But that's going away, right?
Correct. De-dollarization.
Right.
Rapidly. And then it'd be one thing if we're like, hey, we know that we need to keep the petrodollar alive. We know that money velocity matters. It's like, well, if you're in our business, like, we look at the world probably a lot differently than even the
we
average.
got a skewed lens.
I look at it and I go, oh, the calls are coming from inside the house,
Yes.
Right. So I wore my friend Charlie Robinson as the Macroaggressions podcast. He gave me a shirt when we were in Anarchapulco together down in Mexico. And it just says "Controlled Demolition." And I wore it the other day. I'd forgot that I had it. And I wore it, put up on my Instagram. And I'm like, this is, if I was going to take a shirt and describe like economics, politics, the dollar, this is it.
My son, he's 3, and it's so funny. I'm like, hey, dude, like 9/11, and he goes, "Inside job."
Right.
But it's like everything, right? Like, you could say that for anything, and he could say "inside job," and I really should just take a recording because it's a cute little like baby voice. and I should just put that in all of my episodes. Like, that should just be my intro now, is him saying inside job, because isn't that everything?
Yes, and it's highly unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think you can. We really have to, as podcasters, as commentators, as thinkers, we have to be careful not to ascribe everything. Some things are organic.
Yeah.
Sometimes history has consequences. Sometimes the simulation, whatever they run, isn't right. Like if they're, I don't think that the powers that be are winning. I think they look terrible right now. I think they've overshot. I think they have.
They're trying to course correct, but I think so many people are waking up and they're like, oh no, we've messed up somewhere along
It's
the line.
bad.
Introducing My Pay from Chime, a revolutionary new way to get paid. Let's say new dates to your favorite band's sold-out tour drop Tuesday, but you get paid Friday. Life doesn't wait for payday. With My Pay from Chime, you can get up to $500 of your pay before payday. No interest, no credit check, no mandatory fees. My Pay. Get paid when you say. Start at Chime.com. Eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee to get funds instantly. Provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. and Stride Bank N.A.
Summer's here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in 2019, I'd relaunched my radio show. I was in San Antonio, and I'd go on every night after Mark Levin. I would go live, and these, this is like standard conservative radio. And then you'd hear me, and they don't know what to make of that, because I was like, okay, this is what you need to pay attention to is the Great Reset. This is 2019.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm talking about the World Economic Forum, and I'm talking about Davos, and I'm talking about globalists, and I'm talking about, and I started noticing something that was happening. There was a massive amount of liquidity being pumped into the markets called the repos. And I really don't know what it is, other than it's like the clearing houses, like all these banks, they needed to clear checks, clear funds, clear wires. And they were short, like they needed funds. So the central bank stepped in. $6 trillion was created in the last quarter of 2019. $6 trillion out of thin air. And I started taking notice of that. I said, there's something wrong. And then they had the largest exodus of CEOs in history. Right before COVID 1984. Most people don't talk about that anymore. I was talking about it because I remember I was hosting on InfoWars and going on the David Knight show, and I had my own show, and I'm like, guys, pay attention to this. They're talking about the Great Reset. Like, this is what they're doing. And then, of course, how convenient. You have this thing where you have to lock everybody down and you have to cool off the money supply, right?
Weird.
And then they just really ramped up that's when I talk about 80% of all the dollars ever created.
Yeah.
It's no joke, man.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't really fathom how large the number trillion is.
It's 100 billions.
It's 1,000 billion.
1,000 billions.
So,
dang it.
So a billion seconds ago in time was 32 years. Okay?
Yeah.
Trillion seconds ago is 32,000 years.
Yeah, well, when you put it like that.
Think about it. And now a lot of people don't believe in space.
No, say that again.
So if you want to look at it on a measurement of time, 32 years ago was a billion seconds. It's 1,000 billion. So 32,000 years ago is a trillion seconds in time.
Wow.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
But we just throw a trillion around like it's no big deal.
Big.
By the way, there's not enough paper on Earth to even do $1 trillion. But let's say you could. Let's say you could.
Can't.
Right. But let's do a thought experiment.
Okay.
If you could print 1,000, if you could print 1 trillion $1 bills, and you just stretch them end to end, like you place them end to end, and you just put them out into space, they'd go to the sun. They go 93 million miles.
Well, you're assuming that the Earth is round.
Well, see, I know,
I'm just
space
kidding.
is
I'm
fake,
sorry.
and I know, I just like, I know, I said that on tinfoil hat. It was funny because I was like, well, that's if you believe that there's space, but I'm like, let's just for all intents and purposes,
let's for argument's sake.
But they've made stuff. It's hard to know what's real. I just know that if we don't have, like, we have an election this year. Is anybody talking about having sound money?
No, but it's a distraction though, right? So we have this actual thing that people should be talking about, right? Our money system is so messed up that we should be paying attention to this. But instead, somebody almost killed Donald Trump.
Yeah, but then nobody talks about that anymore either.
No, let's throw that out. That's gone.
Now
talk
it's
about
time for Tim Walz, and he's cuddly.
Yeah, let's talk about the
joy.
next thing.
Joy is happening now.
It's just like, what's the next distraction? What's the next thing? Well, let's throw the next thing at your face.
I mean, at least they have some really bad distractions. I mean, can't you just give me some aliens or we get some?
No, they threw out aliens and everyone was
like,
yeah,
yawned.
Whatever.
Everybody yawned.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what else? What else you got?
Okay, yeah, we know aliens are real. We don't care anymore. Like that was so 70s, 1980s.
Yeah, we're done.
We're over that.
Yeah.
We don't care about
it's
the aliens.
so true. But they change the narrative so fast now.
Yeah.
We're just distracted beyond. But so my wheelhouse, like I go to bed, sleep, thinking about this. I wake up, I'm thinking about this. This is what I do for my, for a living. But I also tie it to history. I mean, I'm interested in life. Not just precious metals or Bitcoin. I'm interested in all like history, like. Why do we have the current reality that we do? I'm interested.
Yeah.
And it just happens to track back to the thing that is in my wheelhouse, which if you take out the central bankster model, the corruption really dissipates. It's still there, but it's not like it is today, where you literally have a front organization known as the United States government covering up who is actually running this thing. Mm-hmm. And you don't see those people.
Isn't that the point?
Well, it's kind of like, okay, I'll give you an example. You've seen the play and the movie Little Orphan Annie, mm-hmm. Right? Annie, right? She has Daddy Warbucks, right? Daddy Warbucks is based off a real person. And if you watch the movie, Daddy Warbucks is I think it's Albert Finney plays Daddy Warbucks in the 1980s one. Mm-hmm. And he's playing a guy who's picking up the phone and calling Franklin Roosevelt, telling him what to do. These little subtleties. People back then knew what was happening. Well, Daddy Warbucks is based off Paul Warburg. It's a real person. He was the first head of the Federal Reserve. One of the richest people in America, and he took this job as the head of the Federal Reserve for like nothing, right?
Nothing.
I'm
doing quotes. You guys can't see
he's doing
it, but...
God's work for you, the people,
yeah.
Right? So he's one of the first heads of the Federal Reserve, the first head. Well, that was 1913, 14. Then we have the war to end all wars. We have our mortal enemy in Germany, okay? Guess who's the head of the central bank in Germany in World War I? Max Warburg, his brother. Okay? So when you talk about bankers' wars and they fund both sides and all that, and don't get me started on, well, if you want to, you can.
Let's get you started. I don't even know where we're going. Let's do it.
Well, if I was to redo the educational system, or just if you could give me just an hour to talk to kids, and I do this sometimes, like when they come into my shop, or if I've been asked to speak sometimes, but it's like limited. If we could just all recognize the fact that worldwide communism is always funded by the world's richest people. When I learned this, because I grew up in it's the Cold War, it's us versus them, it's capitalism versus communism, this is Rocky IV, we're going to go fight Ivan Drago, It's not that at all. It's the Rockefellers you covered the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers had their own runway in the Soviet Union. They had all these deals that they did, of course, set up by the Rothschilds. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Mao's China in 49. if you can get to that, and then you understand, just like at the end of World War I, we loaded down Leon Trotsky with gold, and he was a newspaper reporter in New York. And Woodrow Wilson made sure he had safe passes through Canada to get over there and start the revolution. Same thing with the Warburgs, they had a sealed train car with linen, loaded it down with gold. See, all these commies, you give them gold. They always they get the gold. They get the gold, and the bankers. If you could just unpack that, history looks so much different. You're like, oh, I see, it's not organic. Like some things, again, some things are.
Yeah.
But it's the main things, the main movement, the prime movers. These are people that have the inside status, that control the money supply. They put things in motion. So it's hard to sit back and go, well, it's like today, I was on a standard conservative talk radio show, and I always try to be careful, so I don't want to melt people's minds, but we're just talking about like the Kamala Harris tax plan, and I'm like, oh, you realize though that the richest people in the world love that tax,
right?
That's what's lost on the progressives and the left. I'm like, you're funded by the world's richest people. They love high taxes. They love regulation. They love bankrupting the middle class. You know that, right?
Yep.
They can't see that. They just say, oh, tax the rich, eat the rich, we get the rich. And I'm like, the rich love what you just said, because they make sure that no one will ever compete with them. And you're carrying out their wishes. You're a tool for the world's elite, and you can't see them. And that's what communism is. It's like, you think it's a coincidence that the birthday of the Illuminati is the exact same day that they celebrate worldwide communism? Oh, is it really? I mean, it's May 1st. Come on. I mean, just May 1st, 1776, and then, what is it, 100 years later? Oh, also communism. It's Labor. By the way, it's Labor Day today, which we should talk about.
It is Labor Day.
Eisenhower moved that holiday. It was May Day. Like it's Worker Day, and then we moved it to September, way out of May. Just get it off that.
We're not talking about that. We'll just move it over here. It's far, far, far away.
Well, it's a different day. We'll recognize our workforce, but there's something very satanic. I wonder why. It's Illuminati. So that's the kind of history, and people, if you could just give 20 minutes in school, like before you leave, here's Tony. I'd love to see that. But I want to tell you all about it.
They won't, because schools are controlled to brainwash, right? So actually...
So I had the bell, it's the Rockefeller system, like the bells and the Prussian model, obedient soldiers.
Factory workers.
Factories
use bells. Yep.
George Carlin said, just smart enough to turn the machines,
but not
smart enough to ask why.
Yep.
Because,
and just back to like the progressive this tax situation, right? Well, if you're gonna tax the crap out of the rich, right? Well, the rich are gonna get richer. Like, you're going to tax them. They got rich in the first place. They're going to get richer. And all these ways that what are they even called? These plans that they have to take these taxes to give back, right? They're not actually giving back, and they're actually hindering the people from figuring out things for themselves. So you're actually making the poor people poorer by giving them all these plans or programs and all these different things, right? So you're making the poor people poorer, you're making the rich people richer by taxing the rich. Well, now you've got the Rockefellers and the education system. We're not going to teach them the right way. Well, isn't it interesting how all these people who are waking up, they're now homeschooling all their kids because they're like, we got to teach them how to not just be factory workers, how to ask the questions, how to teach them the actual history, not this corrupt history, not these corrupt things that are happening. We got to teach them some real real history and how to really put in some work and really do something with their lives.
Yes. And I think the cool thing I've seen is that a lot of people realize that the educational system, it didn't fail. It did what it was supposed to do.
It did, yeah.
It's making sure that you are lost and that you can, conform, sign up for whatever daddy government is telling you to do. But I love the spirit. I think deep inside the American people, it's like there's still those who want to throw tea in the harbor. And you can see, like, in the entrepreneurial spirit, see like a lot of young entrepreneurs, people want to start a business, start a podcast, do something, just not be in the machine, in another cog. COG is continuity of government, COG. And so I think you're watching history unfold, where just all this stuff comes pouring out. It's funny when I look at history now, and I was telling you before we started the show, like I just get my Kindle out, and I'll just like find any books related to like the monetary system. And there's a lot of court historians and stuff. So I find these books, and then if I go through them and they don't have the decency to like just point out the conspiratorial, like even the AI now doesn't know, it's not supposed to tell me that there was a conspiracy on Jekyll Island. You can literally go look it up, and it's like, oh, it was a very secretive meeting, and it didn't have any records until the 1930s. And it's telling you this, and it doesn't mean to. Like, right. It doesn't. And its handlers haven't figured out. Oh, that's foreboding. Yeah. It is funny though, because if you look at history without we're supposed to believe that the world's power elite are benevolent. Like, they want to keep their power. How do you do that? Well, you create this massive controlled opposition. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. You have this, like, the thesis in the 19th century was the Industrial Revolution, the robber barons, massive wealth concentration. They're like, okay, what do we got to do? Well, we'll get this shadowy group called the League of Just Men. You ever heard of these people?
I haven't.
You should look this up.
Yeah.
The League of Just Men, this shadowy group of wealthy people. They find this writer and this so-called economist, and his name's Karl Marx, and they say, go make us a manifesto.
I think I have.
And we're going to fund you.
Because
right?
It's like the history of how Karl Marx even got here.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so you create and then they're like, okay, so instead of like, at the beginning of the 20th century, you had people that were socialist, and a lot of what they said made sense.
Yeah.
Because if you're you get these industrialists and the monopolists. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt ran on being a trust buster. He didn't bust a lot of trust, but that was his thing. Like, people realized it was like, who's controlling this? We think of free markets, but they have these monopolies. Well, here's communism. And it's kind of like a funhouse mirror version, and really satanic though, like, because it's top-down, totalitarian, godlessness.
Yeah.
But people like Jack London, who wrote The Call of the Wild, he was a socialist. If you go look at what he said, it's not outrageous. It's not communism. But again, we've so distorted that argument. Now, if you're a socialist, it's like he bleeds into that, and you lose the thread, because I don't think is there any actual real socialists left. I mean, because to me, they just sound like they're just, I'm like, you're just, George Soros funds you, right? Like, and that's what I want to tell them. But so we have this, I think, if you really want to, I mean, you're the Rabbit Hole podcast. So if you really want to go down the rabbit, look at the origin of communism, and the central bankers funded it. So again, like, we look at today, we have ESG, we have environmental social governance.
Yeah. Where's
that come from? Central banks.
Central banks control everything. The money controls everything. Because, and you look at this with, I just did Forever Chemicals recently, but you look at it with like every study ever done ever, wherever the money comes from, that's the answer you're gonna get. So like, money controls the world. Whoever controls the money controls the world.
It's the golden rule. You know the golden rule? He who has the gold makes the rules.
Right.
I don't like that. I like the original golden rule. Like, treat others as you want to be treated. That's more my philosophy.
That's so far gone, though.
But But you have to first understand the origin story. In my opinion, that's where everybody needs to be looking. You can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And if you're focused on the left-right paradigm and the partisanship and the politics, and we're yelling at each other, which, is just by design. We're supposed to be
Absolutely
yelling. I mean, I saw this story the other day where Trump's at Arlington Cemetery. And they said, look, he's not supposed to be there. You can't take pictures in Arlington Cemetery. And I go, well, one of my best friends is in Arlington Cemetery. I put him there. I escorted his body up there. He was my best friend. And you know what? Put a camera on his gravestone. Tell people how he got there. And these idiots, like we're just like mainstream, I can't believe Trump went to the Arlington Cemetery. Yeah, we should have cameras there all the time. Those politicians that put those people in Arlington Cemetery.
And why can't they be there? Why can't the cameras
It's just
be
another
there?
thing.
Like, why do you want to yell? Like, do you know why there are even gravestones in Arlington Cemetery? Do you know why there are people there? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, it used to be Robert E. Lee's house. There was Lee home. They put the bodies there to snub Lee. The first part, the whole cemetery is set up as a post-Civil War burial. And it was massive. But then you talk about, my point on my show was, they're fake. This is not, and this should be, go to the cemetery, campaign there, show people, talk about the people that are there, that are in Arlington, and then how'd they get there? What'd they die from? What was their story? I don't know. This is the kind, but see, we so dumbed everything. Like veterans groups. You're a veteran.
Yeah.
Are you upset that they put a camera in Arlington Cemetery?
I don't give a fuck.
Well, exactly. My thing,
I don't care.
But I'm like,
do you care? Your friend is there. I don't have any friends there. Your friend is there. Do you care?
I care that they're not there. I was like, when I read the story, I go, so again, it's fake.
Yeah.
Veterans outraged, blah, blah, blah. And it's just Drudge Report. I'm like, it's like, just give me a break. Literally, we're losing the country. It's an inside job. It's a controlled demolition. Like I mentioned earlier, folks, go look at the history of the petrodollar and look that it lapsed in June and they didn't do anything. Like in Sherlock Holmes, they always talk about the dog that didn't bark. It's not what they said, it's what they didn't say.
Yeah.
They literally didn't do anything. And there's Bernstein, the guy that's the head economic advisor for Biden. He's written articles in the New York Times about how we should it'd be good if we lost the world's reserve currency status. Okay, so hyperinflation sounds like fun. We just live in an age where, people just can let that go over their head, but I'm concerned if folks don't know what money is. And of course, we didn't even get into CBDC, central bank digital currency, which is the next big thing.
Yeah.
But understand what money is. Money has intrinsic value. Money is a store of energy. It's, gold is hard to get. Silver is hard to get. Massive deficits on actual above ground supply. There's 151,000 tons of gold estimated that have ever been mined in the history of the world. More steel is poured in 1 hour on this planet than all the gold that's ever been mined ever. So it's not a lot of it.
Yeah.
Silver, same thing. They have a 200 million ounce deficit last year. So they had to take the above ground supply to fill orders. Now you'd say, well, Tony, then why isn't silver $200 an ounce? Well, that's a whole other show. There's 500 ounces of silver in a Tomahawk missile. Okay? Figure that one out. Do you think the military industrial complex wants cheap physical silver? Yeah. If something was JP Morgan Chase is the largest private holder of silver in the world. You know what they were just convicted of a couple of years ago? Suppressing the silver price. That's weird. Why would you suppress the price of something that you hold the most of?
Right.
People get sidetracked. They say, well, if they're manipulating the markets, they make number go up. That's not the long game.
Yeah.
if you wanted to accumulate everything, wouldn't you want to convince people not to buy it so you could buy all of it?
Right.
Exactly.
Keep the number low, because then you're like, oh, it's not very valuable. There's a lot on the market and I can buy it later.
People just keep turning it in.
Yeah.
And like I said, 200 million ounces deficit last year. They had to go get it from that, but because there isn't a lot of silver mining going on.
Oh my gosh.
And silver, you want another rabbit hole, rabbit hole thing on silver and gold?
I love rabbit holes.
So from when we founded the country, the geniuses who set up the monetary system pegged gold and silver. So it took 16 ounces of silver to make 1 ounce of gold, okay? 16 to 1. Mm-hmm. So roughly, you needed, and the reason they did that 16 to 1 is you added up 20 silver dollars, you get one $20 gold piece, okay? And there's not 1 ounce of silver in each, so it's 20, it wasn't 20 to 1, but 16 to 1. Just basically, you get 20 ounces of silver when you add up the 20 silver dollars. So it's 16 to 1. And that stayed that way until 1933, and then something weird happened. They raised the price of gold to $35 an ounce from $20 an ounce to $35. And then it started to get really skewed. So through all of history, silver has been 10 to 20. So between 10 and 20 ounces of silver make 1 ounce of gold in value. Now it's 85. Oh. And then during the height of the scamdemic in the first quarter, it went to 125 to 1. So you're thinking, well, Tony, that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
I know, because even geologically, like just estimated like silver to gold in the ground is 17 to 1. So how do we have 85, 90 to 1 in our current reality? It's because it's just fake paper all over the place, and they've manipulated, again, they need it cheap, so they convince you not to get it because it never goes up, number stays down, it's not a good thing to buy. Well, I know better, and I'm not telling you to go out, and it's not the investment, again, I don't think gold and silver are an investment. Gold and silver, ladies and gentlemen, is money.
Yeah.
That is the representation of what money is. Yes, you can beat markets sometimes. Yes, that works that way. But if you look at this is, and I'm learning stuff every day. I was at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, and one of the big proponents of Bitcoin is Michael Saylor. If you go look at his company, MicroStrategies, again, I'm not telling you to go invest, but if you go look at this presentation he did, I'd never seen it. I've talked about this several times, but he puts this big screen up, and he's going over this chart, and it shows you all the wealth in the world. Okay, so like blocks.
Yeah.
Like, so estimated, 400 to 500 trillion in total wealth. So that could be like sovereign funds and real estate and
like just
business markets, right? Just call it 500 trillion. Okay, so show these giant blocks. And if you look at the chart and look way up in the left-hand corner, there's these little lines. And that little line, tiny little dots, is gold. And then behind that is a tiny, tiny little dot. That's silver, and behind that's Bitcoin. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, so gold has a $16 trillion market cap. So that's it, 16 trillion. And it sounds like a lot of money until you look at the whole thing, like the entire so-called wealth of the world. Right. At hundreds of trillions. And then you look at silver is 1.4 trillion. And Bitcoin's 1.2 right now. Bitcoin will it has surpassed silver, and it'll go past it. So I got questions. Like, how do you have all this over here, supposed real wealth, but only, tiny bit? I just don't think that's sustainable. I mean, if you really look at the wealth, the so-called wealth of the world, and it's based off fake, these companies don't even make money anymore.
It's all pretend.
It's pretend.
Right.
So they want you to play. Like my friend Don Jeffries, he wrote Hidden History. Great book, by the way. Just plugging for Don. If your audience, go get Hidden History. You'll thank me. I read the book long before I met Don. I do a show with him every week called America Unplugged. But he also wrote a book that I read before I met him called Survival of the Richest. And he has a great line about, he's like, it's like a casino. 80% of people have to lose so 20% can win.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, it's true. So it's something to think about. Again, not an infomercial or any kind of investment show, but if you start looking at things skeptically, like, is there value there? Like, you and I can invest in ourselves. We can invest in our own business. There's value there. Like, if we offer a service or whatever we do, like, we know we can get a return on investment somehow, some way. They just convinced us to give our work and give our energy and chase these green pieces of paper. It is a ritual. It is economic alchemy. We talk about Babylonian money magic and all the rest of that. Like, it is real. Like, the term pay attention. You're paying, right? It's to pay attention to it. There's a little bit of history. The 4th century BC, the Romans had one of their temples was for the god Juno, and they were protecting it from the Gauls. The Gauls would come down and raid it. And one day they got an advance warning from some geese that were flying over, and like the geese started honking, and then they saw the Gauls were coming, so they were able to ward off the attack in this temple. And the Romans that later christened it, they renamed it after the goddess Moneta. Moneta was the goddess of warning. And so they named the temple the Moneta Temple, and that's where they made the first mint, and that's where you get the term money, moneta, money. And actually, it really means warning. So money in and of itself, the origin of the word, is a warning. So that's how I take a lot of what I do, like just it. And that when I read that, I go, wow, that is really weird. We have this stuff in our minds, like what we ascribe value to. It's funny because I keep buying histories on money because I want to know more. As an entrepreneur, like, it's funny because I said, why didn't they just, if you learn what money is, like, we're going to chase this, I want to have more money and buy a better car and go to a better dinner and take a better trip, whatever that means to you. What is money?
Right, because money runs the world, right? You have to have money to live. You need money for everything, unfortunately. Right? Every time you tell people that, they're like, oh, I need money because I need to pay my bills.
And I'm terrible at some stuff. Like, I'm like, accountants blow my mind. Like, where there are bean counters, like they're usually not entrepreneurs. They're very good at what they do though. Like, they're just like, you can't do this, Tony, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I'm like, okay, so what if we, and I'm just more emotional. Like, money's like an abstract thing. I'm like, can I feel my way through this? And I'm not an accountant. But I do know how important accounting is. Yeah. Right? I'm very much right brain, but I need some left brain people. And I think that's just focusing in on origin stories. Like, how did we get here? What is the money supply? Who controls that? And then what does it mean for our future? Like, if it really truly is an inside job and they're bringing down the dollar and they're going to, so I tell people the dollar's not going to digital. Or excuse me, dollar is going to digital. Dollar's not going to zero, it's going to digital.
What's up, guys? It's the champ, Sean O'Malley, here to talk to you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. Run your game on Prize Picks.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
It's going to central bank digital currency, which is the most satanic thing that we've ever have been presented with. It's the most pressing challenge. It doesn't look good for them. I mean, 2-3 years ago, I thought, wow, nobody's paying attention to what I'm saying. But now CBDC, the talk is everywhere. So we still have a lot of fight in us. We got to push back on this. It's going to come. It's going to happen.
Right.
But is it DOA? Is it dead on arrival? Does it stick? Do all these other states and here in the U.S. and do other countries put up and say, no, we're not linking up to the IMF and the World Bank, we're not doing the BIS and all this stuff? This is an open question. I see decentralization happening. I love it.
Yeah.
Like, just to store it and people can, you take what you will, go look at the origin story of Bitcoin. I'm not so much concerned with that as I am the impact that it's made on the minds of those who follow Bitcoin, who are Bitcoin maximalists, because you can never unlearn that. Like they learned about, okay, well there's Bitcoin's only 21 million will ever exist, so you can't make more of them. So you have a limited, finite supply of something, which is the total inverse of what fiat currency is. Mm-hmm. The answer is like how many units are there? The answer is more.
Right.
Right. It always will be.
Whereas like Bitcoin, there's only this many.
There's ever will be.
You're right.
You can't make more of them. It's the same thing with gold and silver, but nobody really knows what that number is. I mean, it's hard to get more gold, hard to get more silver. It takes work, but technically you could land on an asteroid, and
maybe there's gold and silver.
I mean, if you could get past the firmament over the flat Earth, I'm just saying. Right? Yeah.
You gotta there's a lot that has to happen.
Right.
But with Bitcoin, we know there's only so many. But with other digital currencies, there's more, right? Like my husband's in a digital currency. I don't really grasp the whole concept. I'm trying my hardest, but I'm just not as
there's opportunity.
Well versed as he is.
I have a podcast I'm trying to get more episodes on. It's just my life has been crazy. It's called the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. I put those two things together, and I seem to be right that they're melding together because more people just, some people in the Bitcoin space don't like gold. People in the gold space don't like crypto. I like both. Get along, guys. Can we just agree that fiat is terrible?
Right.
Can't we just agree on that?
And skip the episodes you don't like.
Right. I mean, it's like, oh, he's talking about Bitcoin again. I only want to hear about silver dollars, whatever. It's all just about being outside, decentralizing, you being your own bank. Like, what's the government going to do with the money supply? I'm like, well, maybe they shouldn't have one. Maybe we should just we already have a worldwide gold standard. We have a worldwide silver standard. We have a worldwide Bitcoin standard. Why don't you just make those legal tender, and then we have private institutions could lend against it or have we used to have that in this country. We have, private banks.
That makes way too much sense.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, don't go making sense around here. You'll wind up dead.
But the states are doing that right now.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm too late. Too late. But the states are making progress with like gold and silver reserves and making gold and silver legal tender here in the U.S. and it's ramping up. I mean, Oklahoma just passed a massive, very friendly deregulation of crypto and Bitcoin. Tennessee, gold and silver vault and reserve, and same thing in Texas. And Texas, recently, I didn't want them to do it, but they were going to make their own gold-backed digital currency. I just don't want states involved in money.
Right.
Okay, but that's just me. I don't need them.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting, and it won't be like people are like, oh, what's going to replace the dollar? I'm like, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like the BRICS nations. People ask me about BRICS. Like, is BRICS going to create a new BRICS money? I'm like, you realize that some of those countries don't like each other, right? I mean, India and China, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, they just don't like the U.S. more, okay?
Right, so they got together, they're like, yeah, fuck those guys, but we also don't like each other.
But we just don't want to be hamstrung by the dollar because Washington, I mean, they literally gave billions of stolen Russian funds that were on, different banking institutions and held in sovereign funds. They gave it to Ukraine so they could buy bombs to drop on Russia.
Yeah.
That's some World War III stuff right there. if you know your history. But everybody just yawns and says, oh, well, that, in Washington, Janet Yellen's like, we can pay for all these wars. Oh, really? You just hit.
No, we can't.
Money press goes burr. And that's and then when they do that, it devalues your currency.
So do you see right now our inflation, I guess it depends, right? Depends on the election, inflation going up or down. Do you think it depends on the election, I guess? Let's start there.
That's a great question. I think short term, if Trump is reinstalled, short term the economy does a little better. Inflation probably slows down a bit. The markets will look really healthy. There'll be a lot more investment. But the damage is so extensive, and I think that it would be a great opportunity for the powers that be to dump the collapse of the current system in the lap of America First, so that it will never come back. Like they can just basically, Biden talked a lot about Trump being Herbert Hoover. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's funny, because you're kind of like Herbert Hoover. Did I lose my mic? I don't know. We just haven't felt the pain. Those guys in the 1929 stock market crash, they didn't have the centralization that we have now, where they literally just can hit some buttons and they'll just continue to inflate their way out of it. We're not mentally prepared, I don't think, it's like you go to the grocery store, like, why does it cost me twice as much, 3 times as much to get out of here? What is it, why is my food more expensive?
Yeah. Here's
the trick. It's not. It's just your dollar buys less.
Yeah.
Gold's not up. It's the same. Like if this was 1920 and I wanted to buy some crude oil and some land from you and a month's worth of groceries and maybe some cattle, I'd give you, 10 1-ounce gold coins, and you say thanks. And if we fast forward to today and I want to buy the same amount, I give you 10 gold coins, and you'd say thanks. See what I mean?
Right, same thing.
It's and within the margin of error. I mean,
of course,
gold's done its thing, and I told you about the gold-silver ratio that makes no sense.
Right.
I've done that visually on my show before and tried to stack up. Like I was like, oh, here's 20 of these made one of these in 1933, and now it takes, and then you try to stack them on top of each other to make this one thing.
You're like, it literally doesn't work.
And so there is some skewed there. So within the margin of error, but yeah, there's a problem with the money supply, and it really is the patient zero for the ills in our world. If we understood that, they'd lose a lot of their hold on the psyche of the populace worldwide, if you just knew their game. And I think that they know that. I think they're losing. I think like the World Economic Forum put out a report. They're very giddy because they're like, 96% of nations have a plan drawn up for CBDC, for central bank. And they were like, yay. But what if when it arrives, the chunk of the population, it only takes a small percentage of the population to be teachers and to live by example and show others. Like, it catches on.
Yeah. It
metastasizes, to use a term for spreading, right? A super spreader of information for people to get that. And once you, like the stuff that we talked about today.
Yeah.
If you've heard this for the first time, you can't unlearn it. And nothing we've said is like something we made up. You can literally go look, everything I've said, go look it up.
It's amazing because I get messages all the time from all my listeners, not all my listeners, but I get messages from people constantly on Instagram, and they're like, you make me think. And I'm constantly like, this episode made me Google or maybe search more or whatever. And so people are...
It's fun.
Yeah, they go down rabbit holes after I present information. They're like, wow, now I have to like learn more. And so I'm sure that this is going to make them just like... head first into the deep end with like information. And so I actually had somebody message me recently, and they were like, why do you think so many people are homesteading now. Like they're like starting homesteads and going and buying land. And I think it's a combination of things, but I think this is one of the reasons.
Sure.
Because
you can find value in the energy you put into your own thing, like invest in yourself.
But when the money system goes to zero,
You'll have things that trade.
Yeah.
Yes.
You will have food. You will have things. Yep.
Yeah.
You'll have values.
You'll have value, and that's when the dust settles. I mean, in that, because it has been through all of history, gold and silver will be money.
Absolutely.
I mean, unless it's
Something
like
will
Mad
come back,
Max, like unless it's I Am Legend or something, doesn't? Because then it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You know, at a certain level, people
The
are like
Walking Dead.
People say like you can't eat gold and silver. I'm like, yeah. So we're gold and silver and Bitcoin to an extent are a bet that there's like a civilization, and then if there's no civilization, then I agree with you. It doesn't matter. But then when you got way bigger problems than what your savings or you got big problems. And so I mean, I homestead too, and chickens are great. Livestock, gardening, your relationship with the farmer, and does it have some cattle? Can we get this or that? And just I'm glad people are thinking that way.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference on the culture. Just unplugging from what we were, at least the establishment, what the establishment wants you to live like, is so important because it's a death model. I mean, it's like to rob you of your spirit, rob you of your autonomy, rob you of your liberty. They're just thieves. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just robbing you. So I think these are the important conversations. It's funny too, because everything that I've done post 2020 is just try to like keep looking at what are solutions? Like, how do you fix this? And like education is key. And then like one of the things that I did is I started a subscription service for precious metals. Not like anything out there, because the majority of like precious metals companies, it's intimidating. You call them, you don't have like $5-10 grand, they don't even want to talk to you. They actually don't want to talk to you even if you have that much. It's like, oh, it's not a lot for them. They're waiting for people 50, 100K.
Right.
Most of them, and then they have the online brokers and stuff that are kind of like faceless. You can put stuff in a shopping cart. But I was like, well, what happens to the people that, just regular folks like me? Like I wish I could save some of the stuff that I buy and sell, but I put something together. It's called Wolfpack, and you can get $50 a month. You start, we send metals directly to your door. I got almost 1,300 people all over the U.S. now. It's automatic. It's from 50 all the way to 5,000, automatic. And we even have one for kids, like $35 a month. And I bring this up because I've forgotten to bring it up on the last two podcasts. I was like, I'm on the show.
I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you to.
And
to
I
talk
promised,
about it,
I promised my publicist, and she's like, "Are you talking about your business?" I'm like, "Yes, we sometimes." When we get to the, I'm not a good promoter that way, but I brought it up just because I think it's just talking about solutions-based stuff.
Yes.
And that's one of the things. I turned the model on its head. Because I've been in radio for years. I know these other companies, nothing wrong with them. They have a business model. They got a bullpen full of people to talk on the phone. They just want to, it's a numbers game,
It isn't everything, right? But it doesn't have to be.
I turned it on its head because they don't want to talk to the guy with $50. They don't want to talk to the guy with $500. I mean, so that's why I have like 900 5-star reviews. People are like, this is so cool. And they get variety, and everything has a picture of beans on it. We have like a don't tread on beans stickers. We got beans pins. I got my beans pin on from the car. We got beans everything, and so she's on all the stuff, and you guys have to go check out the web. It's wolfpack.gold, by the way. It's the
And I will share all of your links to everything in the show notes. That way it's easy for them to just go ahead and click on it, and it'll take them right to your website. And they can find you really easy. Do you have Instagram or?
Oh yeah, we have. You can at Wise Wolf Gold. So the name of my company is Wise Wolf Gold and Silver, and then Wolfpack is the program. So it's wolfpack.gold. I made it a separate website, but you can just go look up Wise Wolf, and you can find us on
And then your podcasts. You have multiple, right?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
my website is arterburn.news, and I have a radio program called the Arterburn Radio Transmission, and I have a podcast called Paratruther. You can usually find them in the same place, anywhere podcasts are found. But you can go through my website, and I'm working on that. It's arterburn.news right now. So, yeah, and I do a show called America Unplugged with Don Jeffries, who wrote Hidden History, and Billy Ray Valentine of the Infinite Fringe podcast. That's a fun show. When I was a kid, I wanted to be on the McLaughlin group. I always loved that. And I had Pat Buchanan. And now I do the McLaughlin group kind of in a way that is more like tinfoil hat. If everybody had a tinfoil hat on the McLaughlin group, that would be us. Different opinions, but it's a great show. Smart show on Saturdays on Rockfin.
That's awesome. Well,
I think I plugged enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
Good. It's good because then they can go find you, and I like to have people on, and I know like when I listen to podcasts I like, and they have people on, I'm like, I really like that person. Where can I find them?
Where to find them?
Right.
I know.
So I love when people come on my podcast. I'm like, plug yourself as much as possible because I like that on the podcasts I listen to. So.
And when I say it out loud, I just go, wow, I really need to do something about my ADD. It's like you have so many things. It sounds like chaos. I didn't intend for it to be. Just have a lot going on, but I'm trying to consolidate it right now. And I think by the time the podcast airs, like one of the things I wanted to do was redo arterburn.news, which is my website, to arterburn.gold, and then like have every link to everything. So if I ever did a podcast and you could just find me, then you could find all my stuff. So I'm working on that too.
Maybe by the time, yeah, it'll all.
That's what I was
work
thinking.
out.
I'm like, you're a time traveler now, because if you're hearing me, it's airing later, and I think I will have my website done by then. But don't judge me if I don't.
I mean, it'll be in the show notes. So maybe if it's done by then, maybe it'll be in the show notes and it'll be all fixed. Who knows? Maybe it won't. Maybe our intentions are always better than like our time.
I know.
I always feel weird when I'm a guest on podcasts. They're like, go plug yourself, and I'm like, I have a podcast. And it's called The Rabbit Hole. I like get all weird. I'm like, I don't know why. Like,
It's a great. How did you score that name?
I did not look it up to see how many other people had The Rabbit Hole before I was like, this is the name of my podcast, and I posted it. And then I was like, a lot of people have that. A lot of people thought that name was a good name before I thought that name was a good name.
But it has to secure it in some way. I mean, okay.
I did not.
Roll it.
Sure didn't.
Love it.
I just put it out as a podcast, and then actually one day I was like, I should probably put conspiracy theories in there somewhere after like a year and a half of having a podcast. And after that, people found my podcast.
Interesting.
And
How many
then-
episodes do you have?
120. As of this recording, 127 have been posted.
Wow. Yeah, folks, you have no idea, to make it to 100 on any kind of show is discipline.
Yeah.
That is shoulder to the plow, making it happen.
I have only skipped a couple weeks since I started. I think I've skipped like 5 weeks. I have taken a break. I did the JFK update episode we talked about because I wanted to get it in for the anniversary. It'd been like 60 years or something. I wanted to get it in for the anniversary. I had a baby. The next day went home and recorded that episode. And you know what? The reason I had to do an update is because I left out the theory that the driver did it.
Oh, William Greer?
Yeah, because like I had a baby and I like completely just left that one out. I did a lot of the other, I covered all the other theories. That theory I just completely forgot about.
That was Bill Cooper's old theory.
So, oops.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one. You ever freeze the frame?
Yeah, I think he did it.
You think so?
I think he wasn't the only shooter. There's no way that he was the only shooter. There's multiple shooters.
Oh, there's multiple shooters, and one of them wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, in my opinion.
No. Lee Harvey Oswald was just
I don't think it was William Greer. I don't think it was the driver. It's just a really interesting video. Bill Cooper thought that, and he recanted later.
Did he?
Yes, later in life. He used to show the video. It's like,
Do you
don't
think
watch
it was
the
somebody
president, watch the driver.
Do you think it was somebody from over the overpass?
You ever been to Dealey Plaza?
I haven't. My husband went there when he was in Dallas for some training, so I was like, hey, can you go there and take some pictures for me? But he like doesn't absorb conspiracy theories the way I do, but he loves me, so he listens to me.
Should definitely go. I've been many times. The first time I ever went and walked around was 2011. I lived in Dallas my whole life, and I was over at the Federal Building, and I just took the afternoon and went over there. And I was an expert rifleman in the Army. I mean, I could shoot. I qualified expert with a gas mask on, which is pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I did that before I went to Iraq. I'm not saying I'm a great shot now. I'm just saying I had a pretty good, rifle. I had an M4 with a 203 on it. You know, the 40 millimeter grenade launcher. I always wanted that rifle. That was one they had in Predator, and I was like, I want that one, and I finally got one. But I was pretty good with it, and I went to the 6th floor, and I went up to the window, and I looked down, and I saw, you know, the X on the street, and I go, man, that's a tough shot with a bolt action rifle. You know, a $12 mail order Mannlicher Carcano. And then I went down to the grassy knoll, and I went behind the fence, and I go, whoa, that's where I'd be. No doubt about it.
Well, there's a lot of footprints in the dirt.
Oh, they're
like all over the place.
You go to that place, you go to that Dealey Plaza, and you know there's the whole. See, Dallas is on the 33rd parallel too. Mm-hmm.
There's that 33 again.
There it is. It pops up.
Man, that number 33
same
is
as Babylon.
all over the place.
Same as Babylon. Okay. And so it's the hometown I grew up in is on 33rd. It's Rockwall, Texas. You know, that's where Alex Jones is from. So we went to the same school.
Is that how you got hooked up with him for InfoWars?
No, that's just random. I got he's a little older than I am.
I got some questions for him about Bohemian Grove. If you want to hook us up together.
Oh well, I'll see if I've got some contacts over at InfoWars. We'll see if we can get you over there. You need to be on. There's some people would love you. But yeah, there's something to that. You need to go to the 6th floor. I've been there many times.
I'll buy a flight out. I'm gonna come out.
Well, let's go sometime.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell me when you're going and not because
I have
mine. And I want to walk the 6th floor because when you go through, you go, this is weird. It has a weird energy, like something bad happened, right? But it's also, I get the feeling when I go there, it's like JFK, for all his faults, you know, he's a human just like us, right? He's a good example of what happens to you if you make the wrong people mad. But if you really want to know why he's really killed, I mean, go look at his American University speech in June of 1963. It was after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he had direct lines with Khrushchev, and they had the nuclear test ban on upper atmospheric testing for nuclear weapons. And that American University speech was just beautiful. I mean, nobody talks like that. Our politics are so dumb now. I don't care who's running. I'm talking about both sides.
Everybody.
It's just weapons grade dumb. And you go back and look at that, and you go to the 6th floor. There's just something to it. It's kind of a mixed feeling of like something bad happened here, but think of the courage it took to stare down a lot of evil and say, I see you, and we're going to try to make this world a better place, and let's talk about peace. And that takes courage, you know? So it's an example for people. And it's just like when I talk about going to Arlington, put the cameras on it. Put the cameras on the 6th floor. Let's talk about it, you know? Yeah. The court historians will say that Lee Harvey Oswald just woke up one day and decided he's going to change the world with no help, and he was able to reroute the parade route. I mean, come on. I mean, just come on. You know, and then you unpack that. You unpack the JFK. Again, go read my friend Don Jeffries. He's been in that game since he was a teenager, Hidden History. So anyway, I'll let you close out your podcast.
Oh man,
We'll do another one.
I'm so glad you came on. I'm so glad this worked out for us.
Me too. It's my first in-person deal, and since tinfoil hat, but we're just kind of hang out in the office with my dog, so this is even more comfortable.
It's kind of it worked out. So Branson, Missouri, what a strange place to meet up, but it's kind of fun. I played on the lake yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah, I like the lake. We come out here and go on the lake a couple times a year. So, we enjoy it. But anyway, as always, my friends, until next week, you stay skeptical because you just never know what kind of weird thing is going to happen to you. And I'll see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.